world. This is Steve Rao. And no, I'm not the president of the United States, but I have the honor today of watching and listening and learning from President Joe Biden as they kick off this World Politics show as he visited North Carolina. And I have to leave early because I'm going to a city council meeting. But I did want to say that President Biden visited North Carolina today to talk about his Bidenomics plan and agenda for the United States and its impact on North Carolina, the eighth largest state. He talked about the $3 billion of investment coming in from the American Rescue Plan, primarily focusing on the broadband internet coverage. Today, he announced $82 million for North Carolina that would provide internet coverage to over 16,000 households, and the fact that the average North Carolinian is saving $30 a month on their internet bill because of the American Connectivity Program. There was talk about unemployment being at 4% and the $31 billion of money that has come into North Carolina after the passing of the CHIPS Act. Many in manufacturing of semiconductor chips like Wolfspeed, VinFast, and many other companies like Corning and Comcast and other companies that are leveraging these internet investments to drive and help their small businesses. Over 16 million new small business applications and over 2.7 million jobs just created last year. The bottom line is that there's been over billions of dollars invested in infrastructure, $8.5 billion for roads and bridges, $469 million for clean water, and also sustainable projects. So there's been a lot of investments in North Carolina, and it was really interesting to see. As we talk about world politics and, all of this going on, but we have a very disruptive world. We've got another attack on Houthis. We've got Pakistanis invading Iran or bombing Iran. We have a war in Ukraine. We still have, yes, the president says inflation has come down, but I still think there's an argument made that prices are still rising. And of course, a presidential race where a president, former president, may win re-election, the presidency again, becoming like Grover Cleveland, where he would be out of office for 4 years, Donald J. Trump. And that former president, is under a lot of investigations and indictments and trials. So at the end of the day, what I said on the radio is that the world is watching very closely of what's going to happen in the United States of America. That's why I wanted to share that opening to you on world politics. I think that the Democrats, in my opinion, have not done a good job articulating the message of the investments that have been made and the results in terms of net new jobs, employment, economic growth, broadband coverage. Is it still enough time to get the message out? Probably. But I would make an argument as a political commentator, and yes, a Democrat, that President Biden and his team should have been doing this about a year ago waiting until 9 months before the election. The question is, will there be enough time? And will he be able to overcome his age, which seems to be the number one problem that Democrats, Republicans, and Independents have to re-elect a president of the United States that is 83 years of age? I'd be curious to get the panel's response. I'm going to open up real quickly before I leave you in the hands of Mark Lee, and I will be on the full show next week. But Mark, floor is yours. President Biden, inspiring address. Let's see whether he can deliver and win North Carolina, which he lost by only 1.34 percentage points in the last election. So let's suspect he and Vice President Harris will be spending a lot of time in North Carolina helping.
They've already said that they're going to spend a lot of time here in North Carolina. I've heard that they've got several stops. We know that Kamala made a stop in Charlotte last week. This is his second visit, and apparently they had a lot of conversation earlier today around abortion in Virginia. I actually, before the show, stopped at a corner store nearby and was talking to a young lady, I think affiliated with Duke University, and she was telling me that she had heard that energy prices were going to be going up here in this area, and I imagine in California as well. So that's something that is going to be an issue that people will be talking about as well, because she had heard that there was going to be a rate hike coming here in North Carolina, and imagine that there'll be a rate hike in California and other places as well. But Jim, is that something that you're thinking could be an economical issue that they might have to contend with? And there's another thing that I'm going to bring up as well, but how is it in California? And I'm going to bring in Sasha and Jatovi as well, but how is it in California? And are y'all looking at some of these rate hikes? Because that utility hikes and rising costs and other things in housing could be a factor that will determine some of these things in world politics. But what is your thoughts on that as well, because definitely that is something that this young lady, and I'd never met her before. I just saw her literally at the counter. We were there at the counter together, and we're sharing that conversation. Because the other thing I'm going to mention to y'all, she was shocked about it. And I don't know if Steve has heard this as well, but there is some conversations here in North Carolina about something that we thought we were out of, which is the pandemic and all along those lines, because there is a hearing here in North Carolina, I believe it's on Tuesday, around masking and social distancing. I think that there is a select group of people, it might be the hospital workers and definitely those in the migrant field, that they are targeting. But if that is the case, then that could expand, just like it did when the pandemic first started and all along those lines. But I saw that there's a hearing here in North Carolina, and I'm sure a lot of people will be up in arms about that hearing. But what's your thoughts from California when you're hearing some of these issues, whether it's the pandemic and regulations around how we handle the pandemic? Because a lot of people
Well, I want to end with this, and then I want to leave you guys and welcome Sasha Starr. And I've got to get ready. But we've known that we are going to get other pandemics, right? I mean, and so we're never out of the woodworks, right? And it's always in the back of my mind that, you know, what if another pandemic came? Is our healthcare system prepared, right? And how do we prepare ourselves better to make sure that we have enough vaccines and stuff? There's always going to be a debate about masking, vaccinations, those kinds of things. There's always going to be a debate about that, right? Sometimes I got to be honest with you. I can't stand wearing a mask.
Right.
It sucks. I hate it, right? I'm bad about it. I don't do it. I got a lot of criticism about it, even during the pandemic. Wasn't wearing it during the meetings because I can't talk during the meeting with my mask on. And then it became political. Democrats came in with tight N95 masks where you couldn't even see anything but their eyes. And it was like, you know, can't even hear them talk, right?
Yeah. But I just want to hear Kim's thoughts, because Kim,
my wife is a doctor, and I will say that masking does help, right? She gets mad at me a lot of times that I go to a lot of events, and she often calls me, you're a walking COVID nightmare. You know, let's stay away from, you know, husband or son because I'm everywhere, right? I've got old parents. And she says, you know, and so I'm trying to, you know, stay safe. But Mark, I don't know. I think this is something that we need. I'm curious as to what Sasha says.
I'd like to hear what Kim's got to say about this. One of the things I heard Kim, and what I brought up, and even Steve was bringing it up to Steve, and I asked Jim about it, and maybe Sasha's got some thoughts in Canada as well, is that I've read recently, and I got an email recently, that there's going to be a hearing on Tuesday about going back into social distancing and wearing the mask. Now, it is a limited audience. It's not as widespread, so it's not like all the schools in all the nations, but they are looking in there here in North Carolina at the migrant workers, and I believe some of the hospital workers, and making it.
I got to head to City Hall. We have a retreat tonight, but I just want to open up today. Kimberly, we had a great discussion about the president's visit. We're going to talk about that next week, but it was all about broadband and right up your alley in the tech sector. And
awesome.
Some interesting numbers shared by the president. So we want to kind of talk about that and maybe bring Lamparello. And I'd like to have a debate about Biden's claim and the numbers from the White House versus Lamparello, and kind of, well, under Trump, the economy was better, because we're hearing different stories, and it's going to make it an interesting election.
I think it depends on where you get your data, right? Have fun tonight, and we'll see you next week.
Yeah, sounds good. But Kim, what is your thoughts around that? Because like I said, I was somewhat surprised at this hearing that'll be in 5 days and all along those lines. And like I said, it is a designated group that is more concentrated with the migrant workers, and I think some of the hospital workers. But what is your take on this? And is there the possibility that we could be seeing a return to some of the regulations that that happened in the first part of the pandemic, when the pandemic first came out back in 2021, I believe it was?
So one of the things I have noticed, I keep up with a lot of my husband's friends, and you know, more of an older community. And every one of them have had COVID this year, you know, and none of them have reported it being as bad as the first rounds that were going around when it was killing everyone. So I think that our immunity systems might have gotten a little bit better. Maybe people have improved them to prevent, you know, the worst of the worst, like it happened last time. So I think that what we need to do is, instead of panicking, use some common sense. Okay. I mean, I spent what, 72 hours in a mask straight. I don't know how the doctors did it. I mean, by the time I got out from there, I swore I would never put another one on. And that was when I was going up to visit my husband who was dying, and I had to wear a mask in the room. You know, and I get it because it was to protect everyone else, or for everyone else. But I don't know how people did it so well. I commend the doctors for going through what they did, but I think we need to put common sense into this. People are not wearing a mask when they have the flu. I know, because I know people who had the flu and they walk around coughing, sneezing on everyone like the flu is not going to kill anyone. And guess what? The flu has killed more people than COVID has and you know, my whole lifetime. So I think use common sense. If you're sick, stay home. Okay, people, honestly, get fired if you don't. You know, don't think you're being a hero coming into work sick. I hate that. I've actually fired people for doing that because you've just made everyone else sick, including me. So, improve your immune system. I don't think we encourage that enough in our country. Eat healthier. Get some quercetin in your body, because quercetin is the number one. They know this for a fact, the number one supplement that fights off COVID. So, you know, not all that other stuff that Trump was trying to sell us and kill us with, but, you know, hydrochlor, whatever, chlorine crap. Who's going to drink that? Really? Well, I think there were people who did. So, but seriously, use common sense. And then if we feel that there could be an inkling of this happening again, somebody please have the common sense to bring the pandemic team back on board. Okay. Trump was so blasted stupid. He could have prevented the spread if he brought the pandemic team on board. And we have the same pandemic team, the same person living in Virginia that saved the people from Ebola in Nigeria. Remember back when the Ebola break happened? Yeah. So let's do that. But I totally disagree with this panic we're going through. Before I went to the doctor's office, they sent me a notice the other day, you know, we're having a widespread of this, you know, we're cracking down. So, you know, I went in and put my mask on without fighting or anything because I love my doctors. But I saw a lot of people going in, not even trying, you know, and I'm going to do it first and foremost for my doctor, because he takes care of me. And if he's going to wear one, I'm going to wear one. But I think we need to use some common sense. We need to hire the pandemic team back in place, or maybe set them on a council. And we need to do it right, not panic and go, oh, you got to wear this or you got to do that. No, I think we need to just do it right this time. In fact, I'll send them the name of the guy who saved the people in Nigeria from Ebola. That was, what was that? 9 days or something like that.
Something like that. But I think that Toby had a point he wanted to make, because I guess
everything what you were just talking about, Kim, is the ideal. And it's sad that science has become political. So therefore, much of the country won't even listen to the actual common sense things that you just talked about, because you're saying woke stuff and you want the Fauci ouchie. All this stuff, which is common sense that we should utilize and actually do, have become political. On top of that, in terms of the staying home, the sad part is, because of, you know, tax breaks and the way their economy is a lot of people who go to work and they're sick have to, because the majority of the country is living paycheck to paycheck. So they can't miss that paycheck. So they're going to sacrifice themselves and others. They don't even think about it, because they need to have money to buy food for their family. And then a lot of that deals also in terms of masking up for the people that are taking care of you. A lot of that comes to, am I going to pay for, you know, snacks for my daughter, or am I going to buy a mask that may not even help me, because this is what they told me on this side of politics. So it's a whole mixed bag that we're dealing with, and there's a culture shift that happened. And you know, again, not saying that Trump began a lot of this stuff, but he definitely gave it a megaphone which helped push that culture shift. And that cultural shift came into play when, he took advantage of all the anti-vaxxers. He was more so an opportunist and utilized them to get himself in power. The individuals, he believed a little bit of racist stuff himself from his history, but he utilized the backs of them and gave them power, gave them a megaphone. So that whole culture shift is what we're fighting now. And science being political is a tough thing to fight back against because, the anti-vaxxers have a political voice now. People are considering voting for RFK. The dude is one of the biggest anti-vax conspiracy theorists out there. Donald Trump, when you were talking about hydroxychloroquine, when he was pushing that, he also pushed household products and a black light on your skin, and poison control numbers spiked when he did that. So we've got a lot of work to do to push back and actually get science being understood as science.
And Jacoby, that's apparently something that happened earlier today on a federal level, because millions of people across the country are living with long COVID, and the disease often leads to multiple symptoms like fatigue, brain fog, and joint pain. And there are people that are asking for there to be a federal moonshot initiative just around COVID and everything. And they've earlier today interrupted hearings with calls to declare another federal moonshot initiative that will be dealing more around COVID. And like I said earlier, I think before you got on, Jacoby, there's been a group of folks here in North Carolina that are looking at particularly around migrants, and I think the migrant farm workers and some in the medical field, about them getting back into the habit of social distancing and masking. And I think there's supposed to be a hearing on this coming Tuesday and everything around that and all along those lines. So it'll be interesting to see whether we go back into that tradition of social distancing and masking. And a lot of people thought that we never should have left it, particularly the social distancing, because that's just common sense by many people.
Here's a tidbit for you, Mark. COVID at one point when and it's still one of the higher killers in our society. At one point, it was leading the nation as the number one killer in our society. Then, of course, since all the medicines and the treatments have also come down and helped us out. But the reason I'm bringing this up is because right now there's a study out there talking about how cancer numbers have spiked. And they're trying to figure out why they've spiked, because you have colon cancer that has really jacked up and really spiked up. And does that deal with obesity? Well, what nation is one of the most obese nations in the world? That's the US. So therefore, everything ties together. And when science, again, becomes political and, based on whatever political whims blow whichever way, that's when we end up, harming ourselves, because we're not trusting the scientists, and we're only trusting the Ron DeSantis, who decided to get rid of his healthcare stuff because, all the healthcare people that were actually pushing back on him and pointing out actual facts. So no, he installed somebody who is a COVID conspiracy theorist, and he's removing all this other. It's just dumb. Because of the political will.
I hear what you're saying. Jim, I had mentioned earlier when we first started, and there's another issue involving California that I'm curious to hear your reaction to and along those lines. But what is your thoughts around not so much the COVID issue, but the issue around, because I said it on last World Politics, a lot of people are concerned about their pocketbook issues. And like I said, when I ran into this young lady, don't know her from Eve, if I could use that Adam and Eve kind of analogy and everything, and wouldn't know her even if you literally walked into my apartment now. That's how quick the visit was and everything along those lines. But she did mention that gas prices are getting ready to go up, and all along those lines, and some of the other utility prices. She's actually talking about Duke Power, so that would be electricity getting ready to go up in this area and everything. But is that something that you're seeing in your part of the country, in the West Coast, where the electricity prices are about to spike upward? Because here it would be Duke Power, so that would be electricity that she was talking about, that is about to have a massive hike and all in that space. And won't that impact people's enthusiasm for whoever's in control? Because if you're paying the X, Y, Z, and you get a 10% raise, you might not be all that favorable toward those people that are giving that raise to your bills and everything. But I just wondering, is that what y'all are running across California? I've been to California. I told you that before. It's on my bucket list of places to go visit and everything. But is that something y'all are running across? And if so, is it going to be problematic for the Democratic Party?
Well, yeah, I'd like to talk to both subjects, Mark, but to answer your first question, it's PG&E, Pacific Gas and Electric out here, is already preparing for a utility hike. And nobody likes utility hikes. And of course, it's kind of regressive in that, that it hits the people that are like living paycheck to paycheck, sweating rent. It hits them the hardest. And the housing prices and rent prices are out of control in California as it is. So any spike in anything, is difficult to manage for a lot of people. And always, the president gets too much praise and too much criticism. These types of things are outside of presidential control, but people will blame whoever is in the government at that time whenever their lives are impacted negatively. So there is that sort of cost. It's one of the reasons that the Fed is considering not lowering interest rates. And I've been saying they never should have raised them to the rates that they are now, and they should be lowering them. But they don't want to be perceived as helping the Biden campaign. So, all of these things, like Toby was saying about, mixing things with politics is never a good idea, because you lose your ability to apply common sense, as Kim was talking about, and, being fact oriented. I do want to thank Kim for bringing up quercetin. I've been using that since COVID was first identified. And I think that I've also been fully vaccinated at every step of the way. And I've never gotten COVID. I don't know if that's entirely based, but I was tickled by Steve's talking about his wife getting aggravated with him, because my wife masks up a lot, and I don't as often as she does, because I hate it. I just absolutely don't like it. But there is some marital friction around masking. There's no question in my mind that the COVID epidemic is still present. Everyone that I know that has gone on trips, has come back, has gotten COVID. Whether it's a cruise, a cross-country flight, that sort of thing. And one of my good friends got it very severely. He was sick for a month. And, Mark mentioned the long COVID. I know people that have that. So this is not something that we can just be cavalier about. It's something that we do have to apply common sense, the social distancing, the masking, but getting vaccinated is really simple. It isn't painful. It didn't take very long at all. I showed up, got vaccinated, and left. It was, not a problem. So I really encourage people not to listen. And the other thing to remember is this was a novel virus. In other words, we'd never experienced it before. And so when the scientists were first dealing with it, they didn't really know what they were dealing with. And so they made some recommendations that didn't seem to pan out. And then people just said, oh, they don't know what they're talking about. And Trump played on that, of course. And, but the fact is we've learned more. We know more, and we do know what does work and what doesn't work much better than we did in 2020, 2021. So, having a committee that is dedicated to studying and recommending procedures, it just is, to me, it makes, it's obvious that we should do something like that. And I can remember when Trump said that we've only had 15 reported infections and the number will be 0. It'll just disappear. And
I remember when he said, we'll put into action when we have over 1,100 patients. And I did the math that night and I go, well, if 1,100 people and you go back 3 weeks, and that's when it started, and then they've contaminated, and you add that up, we already have the pandemic. If you wait until 1,100 people, I crunched the numbers. I can't remember precisely what they were, but I remember crunching the numbers going, well, we'll be in the pandemic if you wait till then. But I have a question for you guys. All of this going around, and we're doing hearings about this, which I think is a waste of our time given all the other things that we've got going on. But could it be, I'm always one who says, follow the money. Well, who benefits? Okay, this is my question. Who benefits if we go back to a mask mandate? Who makes all the money from this? During COVID, a lot of companies, which I was a part of, being in the industry that I was in, and people were constantly calling me, hey, we've got XYZ, thousands of dock loads of masks coming in and nowhere to go because they changed the quality standards. That happened to a lot of people where they already invested in this standard, and then the government switched the standards. So who's to say this isn't to push all of those, shipments?
Like you said, Kim, you follow the money, and I saw Jim's hand, but I would think that a lot of people know that Pfizer and GlaxoSmithKline, and I've had friends that have worked, I think, at both of those companies as well as some other companies, because they are very much based here that are in the pharmaceutical industry. I think I might even know some people in the mask industry as well. But that being said, definitely there is a thing to said for those that are trying to make a profit, and a lot of times that is what they're doing, is going after the money and all along those lines. But I don't know if that's where Jim was going, but I'm gonna turn it back over to Jim.
I would say that we initially allowed paper masks, and we found out that, and this is part of we didn't know what we were dealing with, that the N95 masks were really more effective. Your odds went down if you wore a mask, and if you were talking to someone who was also wearing a mask, your odds went way down. But being maskless increased your chances of getting it. And this is just facts, but I would say in terms of follow the money, Moderna, and I'll talk to Sasha talk to this, Johnson & Johnson, they are the ones making real money.
Yeah, they're making a lot of money.
Well, just to touch on that real quick, in terms of this goes into where it gets back to trying to trust the science and learn where the science is, because this is where we begin to kind of tie two things together and think that the money is where the science is based on the money. And we confuse, for example, this is what the gas and oil industry does, because they hire a lot of these no-name scientists to talk about the particular things, but these particular things that people yell out, the science behind, but it's actually not the scientists that you should be looking at, because there are peer-reviewed papers on the masks and so on and so forth. And yes, there are going to be opportunists there. But again, it gets back to trying to get to the ball of wax where the science is. And this is why I go back to the whole, again, once the politics comes into the play, science part, and then on top of the money part, because the money drives the politics. And that's what begins to we begin to have that major problem. One of the big issues, or one of the things that I think in just our recent history, as a matter of fact, today, where politics was trying to play a role, but it did not, was the Uvalde investigation that just happened by the DOJ, and the response that just happened to that. Because the individuals that called the DOJ to do the actual investigation were shunned by the actual political figures, from the mayor to the governor to everybody else, that did not want that to happen based around politics. But they called and actually had that happen and gave peace to the families, because the DOJ report wasn't based in politics. And it's just like science. If we take a look and have that happen in the science world, that's where it used to be, but it's not now. Politics plays such a high role based on what Trump tried to do.
No,
getting into the science, I would like to know, is the duration rate from the point that you determine when you had it from when you actually contracted it, is that window and gap still as large as it was before? It has that shrunk? I would like to know some of these details that they're not sharing with us, right? Has that gap shrunk? Are we spreading it while we're thinking we're healthy? And if you remember, guys, you remember when they first started coming out, they go, oh, just stand a foot away from each other, just a foot.
That's the social distancing.
Then 3 feet. And then it became, and I'm singing in my mind, you're a mean one.
Just really quickly, because I was going to pivot the discussion just slightly to two other issues. One that I know we'll love and everything before we go, because we're at the halfway point. But this is for you, Jim, and everything. There was a very popular governor that got himself in trouble by going to Munich, Germany. But I thought that, you know, as a politician, you would know the rules around declaring stuff, because apparently Arnold Schwarzenegger went over to Munich and he got held up in Munich because he was doing a luxury watch. And I think it's a luxury watch that he was going to give off for an auction, which is a very noble thing to do. I think it was around climate change, even, that he was going to do this donation for and everything. But apparently he forgot to declare it. And I'm thinking, you've been in government, you've been in entertainment, you've been in a number of these fields. That should almost be like secondhand. But I guess his handler didn't know what to do, or maybe he didn't know what to do himself. So he got apprehended, I think it was about for 3 or 4 hours. And now he's having to live with some of the embarrassment of that for exactly those reasons. But I'm just wondering your take on that as a Californian and as this gentleman, that while he might have been a conservative governor, he was a governor there in your state of California and all along those lines. And I would think that with all that experience, you would know that you're supposed to declare something, even if it's a luxury watch.
People make mistakes, and, you know, he was a better governor than I thought he would be, you know, just because I didn't think he had any background in it, but he did do a decent job. And, you know, he worked across the aisle, which is one of the things that I admired about him. But, you know, when it comes to something like that, obviously it was an honest mistake. He wasn't trying to profit from it or do anything like that. And so, you know, I just say, I put myself in that situation, and that could have easily happened to me if I was like him. And you know, these are the types of things that people like to talk about. But really, I think it's time to be compassionate. You know, poor guy, he messed up. Okay.
He messed up. Speaking of messing up, there is a thing, and this is what I want to hear from everybody on this. Is the issue I was going to get to. I definitely want to hear from Sasha on this. We've had a number of people on the network and on this show that have talked about this notion of it being wrong for President Biden to want to declare that he wanted a African-American woman to be his vice president. And I know that he did make that declaration and everything. Nobody has actually pointed to the fact that his opponent has pretty much said the same thing, because his opponent has said that he would like a woman to be his vice president. As a matter of fact, I think he's going to be stumping with one of them, Elise Stefanik or something like that. I think it's her name, but she's a House of Representative lady, and they're going to be stumping together in New Hampshire and all along those lines. And I've always thought, and correct me if I'm wrong, I know, I think, Kim, you've had some background in the political landscape or friends in the political landscape. My mom ran for Secretary of State, and I know there are others on this network that have had political landscape, experiences and dialogue in the political landscape. I don't know any politician that doesn't try to use their vice presidential choice in order to win a demographics. There was a reason that LBJ was picked by Kennedy. He was trying to win the South. There was a reason that Mondale was picked by Carter. He was trying to win, I believe, the kind of like the Northeast area and everything, because Carter was from the South and everything along those lines. So there are usually reasons that people are picking demographically wise. So it doesn't make any sense when people are telling me that it is wrong to pick somebody because they're Black or because they're Hispanic or because they're LGBT or whatever they're picking them for, if they are using them as a way to shore up what they feel they are weak in. As far as I know, that's gone on all the way back to the first president. I think Abraham Lincoln picked somebody that he wanted to, and George Washington, to shore up what they were feeling weak in, even if it was rural versus urban. If you were a farmer, you might want to pick a city slicker, and I'm using that term kind of.
So we're going to take a minute for a quick interruption in the show for our commercial break. We'll be right back.
Now, what were you going to point
Well,
out?
thank
Jacoby?
you,
wanted to point out?
everyone. And don't forget, we have merchandise too. And all of our money goes to help support these great and wonderful shows that you get to watch free here on Pod TV. And thank you for watching. So what was the question, Mark, and who's next? I think somebody had
It was
their hand.
Jacoby, and I was talking about this notion that there has always been politicians that have tried to leverage their weakness, whatever that weakness was. If you felt you were weak as a minority, you might pick a minority candidate. If you felt you were weak in the rural area, you might pick a rural candidate. That's been going on since the beginning of the presidency, best as I can tell. Am I wrong, Jim?
Mark, you're right. Pence was picked because he wanted to shore up the evangelical base.
Right.
It's only a problem when it's a woman or any other minority. That's the only time when there is an agitation or an anger around that. It doesn't matter about anything else. We just got to be honest. Yeah, if it's a black person, they're going to get mad. Oh, it's a black person. It's a black woman. It's a woman. Yeah. So there's only an issue when it's a woman or any other minority in that position. For example, look at Pete Buttigieg. He was the first LGBTQI individual in presidential cabinet. People were outraged over that. Why? Not because he couldn't do the job.
Which he could.
And he's done a fabulous job.
I'm not going to say most anyone can do the job, but any candidate that is up and running can probably do the job. I think I'm insulted when someone uses it as their platform that they're hiring or using a minority for their campaign. I think that is probably the most.
But Kim, that's what I would just said. Isn't that tit for tat? Because even though he might not have officially declared it, it's been pretty much stated that was the criticism. What you're saying of Biden picking Kamala, and
right. I mean,
Trump has pretty much said that he's going to pick a woman.
Right, but I just think it's very insulting for them to say, I'm going to pick a woman. Why not just say, I'm going to pick the right human?
The best.
I'm going to pick the most intelligent, most
democratic
person who can negotiate
but I think,
with me and
Kim,
run beside me.
I think the issue comes into play again. Pence was only picked. Well, Pence's main thing, the reason why he was picked by Trump was to shore up his evangelical base, and all the other individuals were picked for particular reasons to share up. And even, but it wasn't. There was no argument, or there was no insult from the evangelical base to say, "Hey,
no outrage at all."
There's only outrage when it comes to, "Hey, I feel I don't want it to be. You only picked her because it was a woman." Well, Pence was only picked because of the evangelical base.
And the fact is, they didn't come out and say, "I'm going to pick a white male."
Yeah.
They just did all the time.
And
it's just accepted.
The one thing that I'd say on this subject is when Thurgood Marshall ended his term end. I think the Republican president at the time, Bush, picked Clarence Thomas. Now, you could not ask for a worse replacement for a legend like Thurgood Marshall to be replaced by a man like Clarence Thomas. But they did it because they were losing one black judge. They needed another black judge who was conservative. And they looked around and there weren't that many, but, they found one. And, the Anita Hill hearings still have, get creepy feelings when I think about that. But, the guy has been a disaster as a Supreme Court judge. So
honestly, what Sasha just pointed out was even perfect for this discussion, because Sasha pointed out Sarah Palin, and Sarah Palin was only picked because she was a woman. That's the only reason. But it falls upon us as our voter base.
It hurt John McCain's platform too, because it was a woman. I was at the disabled veterans hospital a lot during that time frame, and I would sit and listen to men, and they wouldn't say anything about, "Oh, that stupid woman, she can't." No, they said, "We can't believe that he would actually run with a woman. There ain't no way." You know how these Southern men can get.
In California, if you drive an hour, you're in the Central Valley. It's like a different country, a different state. And I saw signs that said, "Vote for the hero and the hottie."
The hero and the what?
So, I mean,
exactly.
Yeah, but you know what? That's insulting too, and that's actually probably a degrading campaign, because
But
you
those
know,
are the big bold signs, and that's the
I
way
mean,
they
who's going to
voted.
vote for a hottie? So that was their side really
So-
running us down. I mean,
Yeah,
Well,
absolutely.
what in
picking her because of her. I haven't heard anyone ever say, I chose this person because they are smart, qualified, know how to speak, know how to communicate. I
Kim,
have
that was
all
my
I
point.
hear
That was my
is
point. I
I
don't think that
picked
anybody did that
this
even
woman.
in the. I don't think anybody did that even in the Jeffersonian and the Lincoln days, because I think there was a lot of backroom deals even back then where they were picking them to shore up whatever they felt that they were losing. If you felt that
Right.
you were losing the rural vote, you would go find somebody that
White
was
males.
a rural individual.
Yep.
So I think that has been going on since the beginning of politics.
But
Yeah, I mean, we
it
would love this
wasn't
idea.
about they didn't, but back then it was all white men anyway.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I mean, but now they use people as a label. They label people, and that's how they're. But I would have been a little bit mad if I was Kamala, and they're saying, "Well, we picked her because she was a African American woman. Why not?" I picked Kamala because she was the most qualified to
hold on a second.
communicate.
Well, that's the thing,
Kim,
though.
hold on a second. You served on boards. I've served on boards, and it is a known fact that there are people that pick people on the boards because they want to get that same thing with demographics and everything, or they want skill set. There are people that are picked on the board
Absolutely.
because
You want
they want an accountant on the board. They want somebody that knows how to crunch numbers. They want somebody that has a business.
But there's
I know
also
for a fact that I was picked on some boards because of my artistic and creative connections and because of my race and everything along those lines. So that goes on in boards. My mom was picked on the BB&T board.
Well, if we ever listen to the Senate hearings, Kamala Harris was brilliant in interrogating witnesses. She was really sharp.
She was also, I think it's one of those things where, for example, and this goes into the Sarah Palin versus Kamala Harris type issue. So people did not accept Sarah Palin because of her, what she said, how she talked, how ridiculous she became. She became that
from her house.
Yeah, she was just a joke. But we saw that Kamala Harris is extremely qualified, and she was accepted that way. So it's a difference of, being accepted, being chosen because you wanted to shore up the minority base and blah, 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 blah. However, her qualifications is what really got her that opportunity, and people saw that. They didn't see that in Sarah Palin. They just saw Sarah Palin as just that token. So there is a part of tokenism that takes place, but that tokenism, it all deals with the context of the situation. Because
Hillary Clinton was more than qualified. I don't know if you could have gotten someone more qualified, but a lot of her gender was used against her, and there's a lot of pitfalls, for women in politics. They can't look angry. They have all sorts of constraints on them that men don't have.
You want to know another one? And it's in the media too. And my sister didn't believe me, but then she made the mistake of making an insult about it. We can't wear the same dress twice.
Yeah, right.
No, we can't. But a man can wear the same blasted suit every day for 10 days, not even change his tie.
Or just rotate him.
And nobody says anything about it.
Yeah.
And my sister goes, "Oh, you don't know." And then one day, I kid you not, the weather girl wore the same dress 2 days in a row, and she goes, "Can you believe that girl? I mean, I cannot believe is she running out of money?" And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" And she goes, She wore that dress last night?" And I'm like,
doing the walk of shame.
And you were coming down on me because I say I have to go get a new suit for every different show I do. Yeah. And, they don't let you write that off let me tell you something, they don't let you write that off your taxes. You are not allowed to write any of that off your taxes. And we have to wear
This is a new shirt. This is a new shirt, but I could wear it on multiple shows.
Right. And you can
You
wear
know,
it out.
and you can wear
But
5
you
or 6
don't
nights a week, I guess.
understand that women, when we have our clothes altered, and this is for politicians too, when we're going on TV, we have to have our clothes altered a certain way. So there's a lot of investment put into the outfit we wear one time. Where again, and so I know this isn't really politics, but it's an interesting fact.
No, it's
That if you
imagery, and
see
imagery
that
is part of
woman
politics.
more than once with that outfit, you're going to say something. You are. It's just going to come out of your mouth or in your brain, and it's
I don't know.
weird.
I don't know about
Well,
that
take
because
for instance,
I
Kim.
don't know about that because I'm convinced that Carter, because he had that farm boy image, and even Clinton had some of those same outfits and everything. So there
I
was a
said
couple
men
times.
can do that,
No,
Mark.
yeah,
You
men.
missed that part.
So,
Men can
so
do
Kim,
it.
just to
Wear
point
the
out,
same outfit 10 days in a row, but a woman
I got to ask a
cannot wear
question here.
it.
I got to ask a question, and Sasha, it's
Yep.
directed to you. I've been alarmed by what's going on in North Korea, and how do you think that's going to play out? Are you alarmed about North Korea and their missiles firing them, and they're talking now about
That's
they're
interesting.
not going to be able to ever reunite with South Korea, and they're being more and more belligerent and warlike.
Can I put him in a addendum to that? Because in that same context, and this is for you, Sasha, as well, are you concerned about this certain countries like, and I mentioned at the end of World Edition, like Ireland going with the one China policy? So it does seem like there is some conversation in the Asian theater, both around North Korea and South Korea, and China versus Taiwan, because you have some people that are seeing them as separate, and some people like Ireland that are like, no, there's only one China. So are you concerned just about the Asian theater in general? If I could do like Nick did earlier, an addendum.
I'm not familiar with studies about the difference between Chinese and Taiwanese people, but there is well-known difference between North Korean and South Koreans. In only 80 years, since 1953 to today, it's already 2024, but it was done in 2023. On average, South Koreans are 5 centimeters taller than North Koreans. And that difference will keep growing. So I don't think that there is a same species. They will never become one nation because some people, it didn't happen, by the way, in Eastern and Western Germany. They were about the same people and they got united. It was very relatively easy process, but in North and South Korea, it's impossible. Different civilizations, different people, different beliefs, different customs. I think that North Korean, for practical purposes, have to disappear.
But Sasha, along those same lines, and going to another part that I know Jim knows quite well and everything, if you cannot really tell that much difference between somebody from Eritrea and Ethiopia, look-wise and height-wise. They are very similar, but as Jim knows and I know as well, they are not that much of the friendly nations. And the same with Somalia and some of the countries that are right next door to them. So they might look very similar, but they are very much at each other's throat and everything. So I wonder about your contrast of the different types of people, because if you look at
it's simple. It's 3 million North Koreans starved to death. They're not being fed.
Right.
So you're not going to grow. You're not going to have nutritious upbringing. In South Korea, they have a better nutrition. They're better fed. They have a better economy. The whole thing is completely different because North Korea is run by a dictator and it's run into the ground by this dictator. People get jailed for trying to pick acorns off trees.
Jim, don't forget, it's also education system, it's medicine, it's just any aspect of life. This is exactly why I'm saying that North Koreans just have to disappear, really.
I mean, and there are some people who would argue the same thing between, like I said, my dad taught in Eritrea, and there's some people that would say the same thing between Eritrean and Ethiopians. They don't really like each other, even though if I was to bring two of them here in this environment, in this particular yard, y'all might not even be able to tell the difference.
Could you tell the difference between Northern Ireland and Ireland? No.
Unless you're thinking about traveling there. why would you care one way or another of difference between Ethiopians and Eritreans?
Well, just because they're in a conflict, and you made the contrast between North Korea and South Korea, and they are in a similar conflict.
Well,
okay, if one group of insects attack to another group of insects, would you care? Tell me.
Well, like I said,
have
it
you ever
depends on
seen
the-
the jar of ants story, right? And you put red ants and black ants in a jar and nothing, they just quietly sit there. But the minute you shake it, they kill each other. The whole jar will be dead. And it's because they hate each other that much, right? So, I mean, we're finding human nature is not that different from the red ant and black ant.
Kim, it's not just the red ant and the black ant. On Barbara's show earlier today, she actually put a quote on from Zig Ziglar, which is that, believe it or not, an animal that many of us do not like. If for those of you like Chitovi and one of our other founders, Nick, that have dogs, you do not like it. Even if you have cats, you are not a big fan of fleas. But Zig Ziglar, the world famous motivational speaker, said that if you put a flea in a bottle, that they are basically conditioned that no matter how high they jump, they will never jump out of that jar and everything, because they have been conditioned to only jump at a certain level. And he made the point that we as humans are very much like that very small insect that a lot of us do not like, particularly getting on our dogs and our animals, because we are conditioned to not only get to a certain level of achievement and everything. That was the point that Zig Ziglar, the great motivational speaker, made before he passed and everything, because he gave the example of the bottle, and he basically said, they just jump up at a certain level and they never get up past that bottle because they have been conditioned. And he closed out by saying, we are very much that same way. We are conditioned to not go past what we think is our mental limitations.
Well, it's also not just our mental limitations, but it's our common social norm prejudice that we develop. We're not born with it. We develop it from the day we're born, and it causes us to segregate from other people. But the prejudice goes beyond anything you've ever seen. You don't think that eventually it becomes they don't deserve to live. And we're all humans. It's kind of like what we're dealing with Texas and the Mexican border right now. And the Texas police and law enforcement aren't even letting the federal agents come in and do their job and save people and rescue them.
Kim, there's actually an ultimatum out right now, because apparently there is a deadline that has been given, I think, by the federal government, that if they don't change, maybe there'll be that conflict that you are afraid of. Because I did see that in the news today.
The Civil War conflict. So I already said that Texas is already separated, but hear me out on Texas. They are a pro-life state. God forbid you go to that state and be a woman, but they are a pro-life state, yet they sat there, the Texas agents sat there and watched a woman and 2 babies drown. Now, we're all talking about this particular incident now, but back in October, there were a large mass of migrants trying to cross that same river point at Eagle Pass. I'm very familiar with that because of where I have been. And there was a whole mass of them died, a whole group. In fact, there were so many of them that the Border Patrol Division, the commission, they haven't even listed the count of them. So my question is, if you're having this many deaths occur, then we have a problem. We have a big problem. And hear me out on this. The governor said that he just wrote a law, several months ago, that it's illegal to come into this country illegally. No shit, Sherlock. But that he wrote this in the fact that trying to prevent these migrants from coming over and saying it's legal. Okay, we know it's not legal, but here's the thing. Nobody read that book or law to them, and humans don't know borders any better than any other human. They don't know. We don't know what they've been taught. We don't know.
This is the saddest part. Because these are, for example, Ron DeSantis is running on an idea of shooting people at the border. So they have actually Donald Trump has questioned why he can't do that. Why can't electrocute people? So think about how sad this is. And this goes into why the
These are
messaging
human.
is so disturbing for me. It may be as well for you guys, but it's the dehumanization of people. Those individuals that you just talked about who died.
I'm
They were human
tearing
beings,
up
but
right now.
they
I'm trying not to cry on TV.
They dehumanize them so much, calling them infiltrators, calling them vermin, saying they're blood, they're poisoning us, they're bringing drugs, they're doing all these things.
They're not.
They're not. These
They're not.
immigrants are just individuals that are
And
looking
what
for
happens
better
Just
life.
like-
if you're poor, you're tired, you're huddled masses.
But
And-
they don't know our
No.
border laws. They're not
But check
breaking a
this out.
law if they don't know it.
Check
just a
this out.
river.
We're just coming off of, again, and I'll point it back again, MLK Jr.'s holiday, right? During that same time, these are the same individuals that like the Abbott and all of them that want to quote and talk about how great a man MLK Jr. was. But yet, if he were alive today, Abbott would be the first to call him woke, first to condemn him and push him away, because those same words and those same people are the same people that watched MLK Jr. march and the police beat them. They watched and just watched it. Look at Selma, what happened in Selma. Look at all these things. These same individuals watched because they thought these individuals across the way, these black people were crooks, criminals, and thugs. So they deserve to be put down.
That's hold on a second. Sasha had a quick point that he wanted to make in everything. The only thing I was going to say about the dehumanizing is that's also what happens sometimes in the African nations, because a lot of times we don't pay attention to the starvation that goes over there, and we try to deharmonize them as well. But as a closing remark, we got a few minutes. I saw your hand up, so your turn.
It's my turn now?
Sasha.
Well, listen, I don't think that what I will tell you will be very popular, but I spent my first 20-some years in the Soviet Union, and I was also in Soviet military service, mandatory service for 2 years. There was no question that the border of Soviet Union was impossible to penetrate, not because it was physically so difficult, maybe not. The only problem is that by the time that you penetrate it, you already said goodbye to your life. And nobody will care, or at that time, and the same thing is now there, nobody cares whether you understand the laws of the Soviet Union. Nobody would understand whether you were warned to stop and move back. No, the rule was first shoot, then ask the questions. So if you're being shot and then somebody asks you a question, you're incapable to answer that question. And nobody cares actually what your answer is anyway. So, of course, the United States, as being more humanistic society than Soviet Union, has different laws. I'm not so sure if these laws are getting the United States much farther, really, in real terms. Because
it's a tremendous problem. It's
a tremendous problem. It's a huge problem. And I'm surprised why U.S. will not establish immigration camps or whatever you call it in Mexico. Do it in Mexico, right? Not far from the border. So people will be going through the system. They will be accepted that, okay, no problem. You can arrive to the United States. You will get green card. You will get in a few years citizenship and so on. Maybe some people, I think Canada would join probably, because some immigrants from Mexico could be acceptable for Canada. And Canada would be able, maybe Canada even would thinking about contributing to this.
One of the things that, no country gave Russia the Statue of Liberty. Nobody thought that the ideals that America is founded on are the same in Russia. But, the idea that this is an insolvable problem is nonsense as well. If we could put a man on the moon, if we made this a priority, what we're lacking is political will. And because the Congress is so dysfunctional, Now, we can't make commonsensical things like, add more judges, add to the system, because the system of legal immigration is completely busted. It doesn't work. So people come across illegally because there's no other alternative. You can't stand in a line and get processed, So put some resources into that. Making legal immigration more effective and efficient is not rocket science, but we don't, because we say we don't want them. We don't say it out loud, but that's what we think as a country.
Also, Jim, to tag into that, I mean, just as you pointed out, the processing is, the main issue that's backing people up.
Right.
But as pointed out, as stated, and it's a quote from the GOP currently, because there was an interview where Mike Johnson, he said that the Border Patrol agents didn't want $14 billion. They didn't want the $14 billion to help with processing and all this stuff. That's what Mike Johnson was putting. But then you also have other Republicans who said that we don't want this fixed because that would give Biden a win.
Yes.
Trump actually came out and said he wants the economy to fail over the next few months because he doesn't want it to happen under his watch.
He wants the stock market to crash.
And that's what I don't get, is why people vote for these individuals that legitimately root against you, for you to fail, don't want to solve a problem because it'll give the other team a win. It's about solutions.
And we're going to get to that at the next show.
Of this country.
Exactly. And it's been a beautiful conversation. I think we've answered a few problems that maybe our government needs to know. Thank you, everyone, for being part of this panel and part of this conversation. And we'll see you next Tuesday. Have a great day.
Thanks, Kim.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, guys.